Hi guys, what is going on and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is really more of an impromptu one just because I feel like it's good information to have that I personally haven't put out before, and I know it's not information that not everybody out there knows. So we're just going to cover it all today in this video, and it's just going to be, and it doesn't matter what the car is. It could be Subaru, it could be this Dodge Neon, it could be that Volkswagen GTI in front of me, it could be a Hellcat, it could be a GTR, it could be your mom's Toyota Camry. I don't care. Today's video is literally just going to be talking about things to look out for when your car is going to blow up, or things to do to keep your car from blowing up. All right? We don't want to see any blow up cars. No blow up jobs. I don't care what the car is. No blow up job. If your car does a blow up job, you're gonna have a really bad time. Now, the first thing that I'm just gonna brush over, I'm not gonna go super deep into this, is maintenance on your car. Make sure you're staying on top of all that stuff. Timing belt, water pump, oil changes, spark plugs, literally every maintenance item. If you don't know what your maintenance schedule looks like for your car, go in your glove box, pull it out. I bet you there's an owner's manual in there. I definitely don't have one in mine. Why is my glove box not going in? Go through your owner's manual, find the recommended service intervals for the maintenance that needs to be done, and knock those out at the scheduled intervals. Those are gonna prolong the life of your car, obviously. Now, some of the ones that I don't see talked about a lot, and most stock cars don't come with this, and most stock cars don't need it because you're not really pushing the car to its limits. This is going to be more geared towards modified cars that you're trying to make some power with, and that's going to be oil. And I'm not just talking about staying on top of your oil changes, I'm talking about being able to monitor your oil pressure. Most of the time, as I've worked with a lot of Subarus in the past, a lot of the failures that I've seen have been from oil pressure issues. That's whether the oil pump is starting to go. People don't do their oil changes. Oil starts to get low. You're consuming oil. High compression ratio cars, turbocharged cars, they're going to consume more oil than naturally aspirated ones. It's just the nature of those cars. Now, because you're either A, consuming oil, or B, you're having oiling issues, what that's going to do is drop oil pressure. When you drop oil pressure, you're not supplying enough oil to the main bearings, the rod bearings, the turbocharger, literally every component that needs to see oil pressure to continue to survive and continue to live. That oil acts in two different ways. Oil pressure going through the engine acts as a way to lubricate everything, obviously, but it also acts as a way for heat to be able to transfer out. Now, oil is not the main source that you're going to get heat transfer to be able to exchange that heat out of the engine and move it to a different area. Most stock cars come with like an OEM style oil cooler, whether that's a water cooled one, an external one. Like my Evo 8, that originally came with an external oil cooler that was mounted up in the front right of the driver's side fender. Subarus, for example, come with a water-cooled oil cooler. That oil cooler goes on where the oil filter would screw on. Then you have water lines that go in and out. And typically you're going to see, I like to call those oil warmers because oil temperature and coolant temperature are typically going to follow each other pretty closely. The best results I've seen have been running a water-cooled cooler and an external cooler. I ran it on my 05 STI, did phenomenal. But oil both transfers heat and lubricates. Now, when you start to have decreased oil pressure, you're going to have some issues with your bearings. Now, ideally, your crankshaft, your connecting rods should never touch the bearings. There should always be a very thin film of oil between the crankshaft and the bearings, whether that's on the rod side or the main side. Now, once you start losing oil pressure due to whatever issues you may be having, that is going to change rather quickly because metals are going to expand when they heat up, and if you have no oil going through there or not enough oil going through there, you're going to have contact between the crankshaft and whether it's the mains or it's the rods. By doing so, you're going to destroy your engine. Now, one way to get around this is by having an actual oil pressure gauge. An oil pressure gauge is going to tell you when you start to see decreased oil pressure. I run one in this car. Since I have a Haltech Elite 2500, I run all of my sensors to my Haltech and then to my IC7 dash in front of me. So because I use a Haltech, I run everything through my ECU and then to this screen here. You guys can see oil pressure and the top right up there, coolant temperature, everything that I need to know I have centralized right here. But for most of you guys out there, you don't have something like this. So the way to be able to monitor these things is having a standalone gauge, whether that's AEM, DEFI, Perrin, whatever gauge you decide to buy for your car. Pro Sport, I don't care. Get a reliable gauge that works. That gauge is going to give you a key indication of if something's going wrong in that engine. It gives you an advanced warning before your engine decides to grenade itself. So that way, if you start to see oil pressure dropping from whatever regularly it's at, like my car regularly my car regularly idles around, I don't know, 18 to 22 PSI. If I know that that's my normal oil pressure when idling, if there's an issue, I'm obviously going to see a red flag because my oil pressure will probably drop down to like 10, 12, 8 PSI, something along those lines. If you start to see a dip in oil pressure on a standalone gauge, you're going to know something's wrong, and it's going to give you advance warning to be able to correct that problem before it takes out your engine. If you're ever curious what rod knock sounds like, That's it. And by no means at all is that a pleasant sound. That sound right there will straight up kill your spirit. Now I know what most of you guys are gonna, or I know what some of you guys are gonna say. Tanner, my car comes stock with an oil pressure sensor. Yes and no. That oil pressure sensor that comes stock on most cars, it essentially is an on-off switch. If the switch sees oil pressure, it's going to turn off. If it doesn't see oil pressure, it's going to kick the light on your dash on, but it's not actually going to be reading what the physical pressure is. So if you do have a standalone gauge, you're able to catch that oil pressure drop before it becomes a problem and before your oil pressure light comes on. Because when your oil pressure light comes on, you don't got oil. Now another one that I want to talk about that I don't think a lot of people know is coolant temperatures, especially during summertime. Coolant temperatures can be pretty destructive to an engine if they get up pretty high. Now, for most, coolant temperatures are going to vary from car to car. They're also going to vary from climate to climate that you live in. If you obviously live somewhere colder, they're not going to be as hot as if you live somewhere like the desert or the summertime in Texas or something along those lines. Now, coolant has a boiling point of, I want to say it's around 348 degrees. Your engine should never see 348 degrees. First of all, if your engine ever says 348 degrees, you either have a bad sensor that's reading or you have some serious problems going on in that engine. Now, for stock Subarus, for example, because I know these cars extremely well, the way that the cooling system works is the thermostat opens at 185 degrees, the cooling fans kick on at 205 degrees. When the cooling fans kick on, that should start to bring coolant temperatures down. Now, thermostat degrees for whatever car you may have, it's going to be different from car to car to car to car to car. And yes, you can get aftermarket thermostats that may drop the temperature of when the thermostat opens by X amount of degrees. It's not really going to help with an overheating problem or a coolant problem if you are running that. The thermostat will open cooler, in theory, keeping the engine a little bit cooler, but for the most part, the overall temperature, if it's hitting a max, isn't going to change. Now, some people do use water in their cooling system, which I would not personally advise. The boiling point of water is 212 degrees. If your cooling system surpasses 212 degrees, you're going to start boiling that water in that cooling system, which is why pretty much everybody uses coolant. It's like ethylene glycol, which obviously drops the freezing temperature of your coolant and it raises the boiling point of your coolant. Now, what can happen if you start to see excessive coolant temperatures in your engine, you can warp your heads, you can warp your cylinder block, you can do damage to the internal. Keep in mind, your coolant temperature sensor is only going to read so high. So if you are driving your car and you see coolant temperatures becoming excessively abnormal, it's a key sign to pull the car over immediately, turn it off, check things, make sure that everything is still good in there. Well, everything probably will not still be good in there if you have excessive coolant temperatures like that. Shut the car off immediately, see what's going on. Now, if you have a faulty coolant temperature sensor, you're probably going to get a check engine light on your dash, because the coolant temperature sensor also acts in ways that affect how a car run, because most cars, if you're tuned on the aftermarket side of things, are going to alter your fueling maps, your timing maps based off of coolant temperature, your idle, a whole bunch of stuff that coolant temperature sensor affects. So if that goes out, you may see like your coolant temperature sensor, if you're driving, go from like 180 degrees up to like 300 degrees or whatever the max is, or the min, it'll default to one of them. But by being able to monitor these things, you are essentially going to catch a problem before it becomes a bigger issue. Now, for me, if I start to see my cooling system go above 212 degrees, which is the boiling point of water, even though it has ethylene glycol in it for the coolant, I will still pull it over and shut it off, just to be on the safer side of things. After you've become more accustomed to your car or the platform that you're working on, you're going to know what the normal temperature ranges are for your car. And if you don't, I highly suggest looking them up just to kind of see what you should be looking out for. Because if you start to see these excessive temperatures, you're gonna have a problem later. And I don't wanna see you broke down on the side of the road. I don't wanna see anyone broke down on the side of the road. Next up, we're gonna talk about something that strictly only applies to aftermarket modified tuned cars, and that's going to be a air fuel ratio gauge. Typically, you're gonna find them in Lambda. You're gonna find words like stoichiometric, all these other stuff. Stoichiometric is essentially just the perfect air fuel mixture ratio. Now, the whole point of having an AFR gauge, if you're tuned, is to be able to monitor your air fuel ratios to make sure that everything is still acting normal. Now, having a tuned or modified car, even some stock cars out there, can be very finicky with AFRs, and having an AFR gauge will tell you multiple potential issues that could be coming if you're seeing problems, such as misfire, running lean, running too rich, things of that nature. You could have a stuck injector. There's a lot that can be determined from an AFR gauge. Now, it's not going to pinpoint the single problem that you may have, but if you normally are cruising and your AFRs are between 14.5, 14.8, just cruising down the road, and then all of a sudden you see like 17, 17.5, 16.9, something in that range, you know your car's going to be running a little bit more lean. If you don't know how to read an AFR gauge, the lower the number, the more rich the AFR mixture is. So if you're seeing like 10.00 on your AFR gauge, then you're running extremely rich. If you're seeing 20.00, you are going to be running extremely lean. Now, if you're running extremely lean, what can happen is you can kill your spark plugs a lot quicker because heat. You're getting a lot of heat. That fuel that you're injecting into the engine acts in two ways. A, it's the ignition, or it's not the ignition, but it's the fuel source to start the combustion cycle. Not start it, but it's the fuel source for the combustion cycle. But B, that fuel also helps cool down the cylinder walls when it does get injected into the engine. So if you're not injecting enough fuel, you're going to start seeing a lot more heat in there. That can kill your spark plugs, that can destroy your rings. There's a lot of things that too much heat can affect. So we've talked about oil, we've talked about coolant, we've talked about AFRs, and if you don't understand AFRs and you're going to get your car tuned, I guarantee your tuner will be more than willing to give you like a quick rundown of what to look for to be able to monitor that stuff. Now, if you are one of the unlucky few people who use an access port still, I'm joking. Access ports are still great tools for these reasons, because they allow you to be able to monitor most of this stuff, except for oil pressure, unless you're in like a 2015 plus WX, because then for some reason you have an actual oil pressure gauge that reads, or is it oil temperature? I don't remember. Oil temperature is another good one to monitor, but it's not 100% needed. That access port is going to be an extremely good tool for you to be able to use to monitor all of these things. I don't know what all of the different like scan gauge type monitoring tools are out there for every single platform, but I guarantee you there's probably some type of access port type device that will let you monitor all of these things as you're driving, so that way you don't have to have all of these different standalone gauges to be able to monitor things. Because personally, I hate having like 9 gauges that I have to try to watch to see what the hell's going on with the car. But I want you to think of your tuned project car as a child, okay? You need to nurse this thing. You need to keep an eye on it, because if you leave it unattended for even 5 minutes, it's gonna go into the kitchen and it's gonna eat a whole ass lamp. Do you know what happens when a kid eats a lamp? I don't want to find out though. You gotta be watching them, okay? Same with your grandpa. Your senile grandpa who just wanders down the street sometimes. I'm watching you, grandpa. Don't wander. I could go on and on and on about all these different things you should be looking out for and these things that you should be watching. However, I do think that those are kind of the main points of what you should be looking out for. Stay on top of maintenance. Keep an eye on your oil pressure. Keep an eye on your coolant temperature. Keep an eye on all of these things that you can monitor. Learn the normal range of values for what you should be looking at for your specific car. Memorize those, engrave them into your brain. Have the little people up in your mind. Take that information, put it in the file folder, and don't forget it. Because if you forget it, you're probably gonna screw yourself later. Having this stuff can definitely save you from having potential engine failure down the line, because if you don't know all of the normal values for what your engine should be seeing, and you start seeing abnormal values, but to you, you don't know they're abnormal, it's probably gonna grenade your engine. And if you grenade your engine, it's a very expensive mistake. I've made that mistake before when I was a lot younger and I didn't know that much about cars. It is key information, you guys. So, I hope this helped you. Like I said, this is a very impromptu video. I just get a lot of questions about this kind of stuff for like, what should you look out for? Like, how do I keep my engine from blowing up? This is just very minor things to look out for that can potentially cause your engine to fail. And if you catch them soon enough, you may only have minor damage, you may have no damage. You can fix the problem and then carry on. So like I said, that's all I got for you guys on this one. If you have anything that I may have missed, please feel free to throw it down in the comments below. Help others out. We don't want to see anyone broke down on the side of the road. I don't care if you're my arch nemesis or not. I don't want your car to blow up. It's fucked up. So, if you guys want to subscribe to the channel, one of these corners, no idea which one I'll put it in quite yet. If you liked the video, you know what to do. Go ahead, hit that like button, turn it black, blue, green, yellow, purple, silver, cyan, whatever color it turns for you. And if you're not already, no, that's it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. So, peace out, homies.